Twilight Fables, where fairy tales are retold in shadow, steeped in dread, and woven with truths that should have remained hidden. Tonight, we descend into the tale of Thumbelina, not the gentle flower child who found her prince, but the cursed maiden whose voice was a dirge, whose song left nothing but silence in its wake. There was once an old woman who lived alone at the farthest edge of a marsh. Her cottage was so weathered that travellers often mistook it for a ruin, a sagging hut ready to collapse into the mud. Its roof leaned inward as though bowing to the earth, and its windows were small, dark eyes, forever watching the endless reeds. No one visited the woman. She had no family left, and the villagers who lived in the nearby town whispered that she was strange. It was not that she practiced witchcraft, though some claimed she did. It was not that she was cruel, for she had harmed no one. It was that she endured. Year after year, she remained in her lonesome dwelling, tending her small garden, keeping her fire alive, and walking among the wetlands when no one else dared. To the villagers, survival itself was suspicious, yet she was not strong. Her bones ached, her breath wheezed, and her hair had turned the colour of cobwebs long ago. What weighed upon her most was not her frailty, but her solitude. For decades she had lived without husband or child, and in the quiet hours, when the marsh hummed with insects and frogs, her heart felt emptier than the hollow reeds. She prayed often, not to God, for she no longer trusted him to answer, but to the marsh, to the soil, to the nameless spirits she sometimes felt watching her. She prayed for something to love, not a neighbour's passing kindness, not a stray cat, not the short-lived joy of flowers that bloomed only to wither, but something of her own, something that would need her, depend on her, fill the vast hollowness of her life. It was in autumn, when the reeds bent under the weight of cold rains, that her prayer was answered. One evening she wandered deeper into the marsh than she ever had before. Her lantern swung at her side, casting thin light across the black water. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. The ground gurgled with each step, threatening to pull her down into its mire. She should have turned back, but a strange pull guided her. At last, she came upon an ancient oak tree. It stood twisted, its bark peeling like scabbed flesh. Its roots jutted from the soil like the grasping hands of the dead. Nestled in the hollow between them was something pale, half buried in mud. The woman knelt, brushing away muck with her frail fingers. It was a seed, or perhaps a pod, smooth, bone-white and faintly warm, as though blood pulsed within. Its surface was etched with faint veins that glimmered in her lantern's glow. Her first thought was to recoil, for it looked unnatural, as though it had grown from something other than earth. Yet the longer she stared, the stronger she felt the tug in her chest. She cradled it in her palms, and for the first time in many years, tears slid down her cheeks. "A gift," she whispered, though from whom she did not know. She carried it home as if it were already a child. The woman placed the seed in a chipped clay pot near her window. She lined the soil with moss from the marsh, pressing it gently around the strange pod. Each morning she poured water, and at night she dribbled a few drops of milk into the earth, muttering prayers under her breath. She sang to it softly, though her voice was cracked and weak. To her wonder, the seed sprouted within hours. By dawn, a slender green stalk rose from the pot. By the next evening, leaves unfurled like tiny hands. Within 2 nights, a bud formed at its tip, pale, swollen, as if straining to open. The woman scarcely left its side. She sat by the window, watching it glow faintly in the dark, her heart thundering like it had not in decades. And then, one morning, as dawn crept pale and thin across the marsh, the bud trembled and parted. Its petals peeled back in slow, deliberate motion, as though they were lips reluctant to reveal a secret. From its heart emerged not stamen nor pollen, but a child, tiny, no larger than a thumb, with skin as soft as rose petals, and hair as fine as silk. The old woman gasped. The child stirred, yawning soundlessly, her eyes fluttering open. They were too large for her face, wide and luminous, glinting with a light that made the woman's breath falter. "Thumbelina," the woman whispered hoarsely, naming her in awe. The child blinked, and though she was far too small, she reached a hand toward the woman's wrinkled cheek. The touch was warm, alive. The old woman fell to her knees and wept. From that day on, her cottage was no longer silent. The woman made a walnut shell into a cradle, lining it with violet petals and feathers. She stitched dresses from spider silk and wove blankets of flax. She carried Thumbelina everywhere, in her pocket, in her palm, upon her shoulder. The child grew, but not like other children. She did not hunger for bread or porridge, but licked dew from leaves and sipped nectar from flowers. Her laughter was like the rustle of wind in reeds, soft and fleeting. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her voice carried a music so pure it seemed to still the air. The old woman lived only to hear it. Yet, with every passing day, the woman noticed things she dared not acknowledge aloud. Flowers bent strangely toward the child, as if drawn not by sunlight, but something darker. Insects lingered near her too long, their wings trembling until they fell, lifeless, into the dirt. And once, when Thumbelina hummed absently to herself, the fire in the hearth sputtered and went out. The woman told herself these were coincidences. She could not bear to think otherwise. One night, while the old woman slept heavily in her chair, Thumbelina crept to the windowsill. The moon was full, casting the marsh in silver light. The child gazed out at the reeds, swaying like black spears, and felt a stirring inside her, a pressure in her chest that demanded release. She opened her mouth and sang. It was a song she had never heard before, yet it poured from her as if it had been trapped for centuries. Low and mournful, it wound through the night like smoke. The garden trembled, the flowers that glowed in the moonlight folded shut, their colours draining to grey. Grass turned brittle, crackling as though burned. The frogs that croaked in the marsh fell silent, their throats swelling once before bursting in stillness. Crickets toppled mid-chirp, legs stiff. A nightingale fell from its perch without a sound. Even the air seemed to curdle, heavy with a scent like rotting lilies. The moon dimmed behind a veil of cloud. Thumbelina sang on, tears streaking her cheeks, though she did not know why. Her voice was not beautiful, it was terrible, and yet it compelled her to continue. When the last note faded, the garden lay in ruin. Not a single flower stood, not a single insect stirred. The silence that followed was absolute. Thumbelina stared at the desolation, her hands trembling. She pressed them to her lips, horrified, as though she could shove the voice back inside. The old woman stirred in her chair, heart pounding with unease. She stumbled to the window and gasped. Her herbs, her flowers, her life's work, dead. The soil itself seemed leached of colour, and there, upon the sill, sat her beloved child, eyes wide with terror. The woman scooped her up at once, holding her close. "Hush, my darling, hush." She rocked her gently, though her voice trembled. She did not ask what had happened. She did not need to. In the hollow of her chest, the old woman knew the truth. Thumbelina's voice was a curse. From that night forward, the child never sang again, or rather, she dared not. When she felt the pressure in her chest, she swallowed it down until it burned. She hummed only in her dreams, waking with tears she could not explain. The old woman tried to forget, but the sight of her garden haunted her. Nothing grew in that soil again. The air smelled forever faintly of decay. Still, she loved the child. How could she not? Thumbelina was all she had prayed for. The curse was merely a shadow she tried to ignore, but shadows cannot be ignored forever. For the marsh was not silent, and word had already begun to spread of a child no bigger than a thumb, whose song could turn night into death. And soon others would come. The marsh was never silent for long. Whispers carried on cattails, frogs croaked warnings that no one heeded, and owls turned their heads towards secrets better left unseen. The old woman thought her tiny daughter's curse had gone unnoticed, but the marsh listened, and the marsh told stories. The tale of a girl no bigger than a thumb, born from a flower that glowed at night, reached ears that should never have heard it. Worse still, the story of her voice, her deadly, silken voice, became twisted in its retelling. The villagers whispered of a child who could sing the stars from the sky, a gift divine rather than profane. Those who dwelled deeper than the marsh, creatures that preferred shadow to sun, heard only of power, and power always draws hunger. It began with the toad. She was a hideous thing, bloated and warty, with eyes that bulged like wet marbles. She lived near the river bank, where she swallowed minnows whole and let her slick skin bask in the filth of the shallows. She had once been young, once sung in the rains like all of her kind, but now her throat sagged and her croak was harsh. No mate had come to her in many seasons, and she had long given up hope of eggs to line her pond. But when she heard of Thumbelina's voice, a new yearning awoke. Not love, no, the toad knew nothing of love. She wanted the girl's song, wanted to keep it as her own. A voice like that could charm rivers, bend reeds, summon storms. With it, she would be adored. With it, she would be feared. On a damp night, when the reeds bent heavy with mist, the toad slithered from her pond and crept toward the cottage. Inside, the old woman slept in her chair, head bowed to her chest. Thumbelina lay in her walnut shell, wrapped in silk. The night pressed close to the window panes, thick with fog. The toad slid through a crack in the door. Her belly dragged across the floorboards, leaving a smear of slime. She found the tiny girl sleeping, her lips parted as if mid-song. The toad's throat quivered. Mine, she croaked softly. She snatched the shell cradle in her sticky hands and lumbered out before the old woman stirred. Thumbelina woke to the sway of water. Her walnut shell rocked as the toad carried it across the river in her slimy arms. The fog hung low and the reeds loomed like bars of a cage. The toad set her down on a lily pad in the centre of the pond. Pretty, pretty thing, she croaked, her voice wet and guttural. You'll sing for me, you'll sing, and all will bow to Toad. Thumbelina shook her head, pressing her hands to her lips. I cannot sing, she whispered. You do not know what it brings. The toad's eyes bulged wider. Then I'll make you. She summoned her sons, two grotesque, half-grown creatures, their limbs crooked, their eyes milky. They clambered onto the pad, staring at Thumbelina with hunger, not for flesh, but for her song. Thumbelina's chest tightened. The pressure rose inside her, that cursed music clawing to escape. She curled her tiny body, fighting it back. The toad clapped her slimy hands. Sing! The air trembled. A faint note slipped from Thumbelina's throat, unbidden, unwilling. At once, the lily pad blackened beneath her feet. The river rippled, fish rising belly up, their silver bodies flashing before sinking lifelessly. The reeds that framed the pond curled, turning grey. Even the toad's sons staggered, clutching their throats as their eyes rolled back. They collapsed with dull splashes into the water. The toad shrieked, her voice warbling in horror. "What? What have you done?" Thumbelina fell to her knees, choking on sobs. She had not meant to sing. She had tried not to, but the curse had clawed its way out. The toad fled into the reeds, vanishing into the night. She wanted no part of the child now. Thumbelina was left alone, stranded on a withering lily pad. As the dead floated around her, the old woman found her by dawn. Guided by her cries, she waded into the pond, her skirts dragging, her arms trembling as she scooped the tiny girl back into her palms. She did not ask what had happened. She could not. She only held her tighter and whispered, "Hush, my darling, hush." But the marsh had listened again. The marsh had seen. And when the marsh carried whispers to other ears, the beetle came next. He was a grand insect, armoured in glossy black, with pincers sharp as knives. He lived in the hollow of a tree, surrounded by his kin, who obeyed his every command. He had once been handsome by beetle standards, but he cared nothing for beauty. He cared for spectacle. When he heard of Thumbelina's voice, he imagined it echoing from the boughs, drawing every creature to bow at his feet. With such a prize, he would be the envy of all. So one evening, as the old woman dozed by the fire, the beetle descended. His wings buzzed low, rattling the shutters. He slipped through the chimney and plucked Thumbelina from her bed, clutching her in his hard grip. He carried her high into the branches of his tree, where lantern bugs glowed, and his kin gathered to admire their lord's catch. "Behold," he chittered, holding Thumbelina aloft, "the songbird of men. She will sing for us now." The beetles crowded closer, their antennae twitching, their shells clicking. Thumbelina trembled. "No," she pleaded, "you do not want this song. It kills." But the beetle only clicked his jaws. "Then kill our rivals. Kill the crickets, the moths, the nightingales. Leave only beetles to hear you." The chant rose among them. Sing, sing, sing. The pressure rose in her chest again, sharp as a blade. Thumbelina wept, shaking her head, but the sound slipped out all the same. Her voice shivered through the branches. The lantern bugs glow dim to ash, their small bodies falling like sparks to the ground. The leaves curled inward, crumbling into dust. The beetles, once jeering, began to choke, their wings stiffening. They toppled from their perches one by one, scattering across the earth below. The great beetle lord fell last, his armour cracking as he struck the ground. Only Thumbelina remained, her tiny hands clasped over her mouth, the tree hollow echoing with silence. She sobbed into her palms until dawn, when the old woman's voice called for her again. Desperate, breaking, the woman climbed, though her bones screamed, and carried her child back down. "Never again," she whispered, rocking Thumbelina. "Never again, my love." But again was inevitable, for the mole had heard as well. Unlike the toad and the beetle, he was no creature of whim. He was ancient, blind and calculating, Deep beneath the earth, he dug his tunnels, collecting treasures buried long before men built their villages. Bones, jewels, relics, forgotten corpses, all were his. He adored silence, for in silence nothing grew, nothing lived, nothing disturbed his hoarded dead. When the whispers reached him, he understood the truth of Thumbelina's gift at once. Her voice was not beauty, it was not charm, it was death, and death, the mole thought, belonged to him. He would make her his bride, she would sing only for him. In the silence of his tunnels, her curse would keep his kingdom barren, eternal. The mole came in daylight, though he hated it. He tunnelled beneath the cottage and rose into the garden like a shadow birthed from earth. The old woman shrieked, clutching Thumbelina close, but the mole bowed with courtly formality. "I have come for the girl," he said, his voice deep and grating. "Her song belongs underground, where it will do no harm." The woman spat at him, though her mouth was dry. "She is mine." The mole smiled without lips. Not for long. His tunnels spread like veins beneath the garden. Already the earth groaned, roots cracking. He could bury the cottage in moments. The old woman knew it. She wept as he pried Thumbelina from her arms. Beneath the ground, darkness pressed close. The tunnels smelled of earth and rot. Worms writhed in the walls. Bones jutted like roots. The mole led her deeper, deeper, to a chamber lit only by fungus glow. "Here you will stay," he rumbled. "Here you will sing for me. Sing, and I will listen as all else perishes." Thumbelina shivered. She could not run. She could not hide. The silence pressed at her, demanding to be filled, but she did not sing. Not yet. She only pressed her hands to her lips, praying someone might find her before the curse escaped again. And so, without hesitation, he had declared her their bride. Thumbelina's heart had leapt with hope. After so much misery, after the toad's damp prison, the beetle's mocking laughter, the mole's suffocating tunnels, the endless flight on the swallow's weary wings, she thought perhaps she had at last stumbled into salvation. The fairies carried her through a forest of blossoms that towered high above her head. Every petal gleamed like satin, every stamen pulsed with golden light, and Thumbelina felt herself shrink even smaller amidst the grandeur. Tiny wings fluttered all around, leaving trails of glitter that clung to her skin like frost. Music drifted in the air, bells, flutes, voices so pure they seemed born from the wind itself. "This," whispered the prince, "will be your home, and I, your husband." She bowed her head, timid and overwhelmed. Deep within, a kernel of dread stirred. Her throat burned faintly, as if the old woman's spell, the curse of her voice, still coiled there like smoke. She had not spoken freely in so long. Silence had been her shield. The birds, the mice, the swallow, none had pressed her to sing. None had demanded she loose what she feared. But now, among the fairies, she felt the noose tightening. "You will sing for us," the prince declared, smiling as though he offered the greatest gift. "Your voice will be our treasure." Her stomach knotted. "Sing," the crowd echoed, their laughter bright, expectant. Thumbelina forced a smile, her lips trembling. I cannot." The fairies tilted their heads, their wings stirring in agitation. The prince frowned, bemused. "You cannot?" he asked. "A flower cannot refuse the sun. Music is life here. Surely you would not deny us?" The whispers began to curl through the air like smoke. Strange, ungrateful. Surely she is not mute. Thumbelina's hands twisted in her lap. Her voice, her cursed voice, was no gift. It was rot clothed in honey. She remembered the beetles, once vibrant and cruel, scattering in terror when her frightened cry had made their wings falter. She remembered the toad's spawn shuddering when she whimpered in the night. Even the swallow, kind and noble, had fallen silent when she sang softly on the journey north, his eyes gleaming with unease as he begged her hush. But the fairies pressed closer, radiant and eager. The prince's hand cupped her chin. His smile remained kind, yet it sharpened at the edges. "You are among your kind at last. Do not fear. Sing, Thumbelina, sing for me." And her resolve cracked. The sound slipped from her throat, a melody delicate as spider silk, trembling and low. It rippled through the air like a sigh. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the petals of the blossoms bowed and browned, their vibrant colour seeping away as though drained by some unseen hand. The butterflies shrieked in tiny brittle voices before their wings fell limp. Grass curled in upon itself, blackening at the tips. The glitter in the air scattered like ash in wind. The fairies gasped. Her song swelled with terror, and the more she tried to cut it off, the more it poured out, weaving its tendrils through the glades, withering whatever it touched. A fountain sputtered, its crystal water turning murky. A squirrel leapt from a branch, dead before it hit the moss. "No!" Thumbelina cried, clutching her throat. But the damage was done. The prince recoiled, his perfect face twisted with horror. Around him, the court whispered not with awe, but fear. "She is cursed. She brings rot. She must not remain here." Thumbelina stumbled backward, her tears scalding. "I never wished. Please, I never. But her words carried the same venom as her song. The nearest bloom shriveled to dust, scattering across the ground like bone. The fairies flinched, their luminous wings folding tight. The prince's eyes, once filled with admiration, now burned with betrayal. He raised his voice, trembling but firm. "This cannot be borne. If she stays, all life here will perish." "But she is your chosen bride," a fairy cried. He clenched his jaw. "Then my choice was folly. She cannot be among us." Thumbelina fell to her knees, her hands pressed against her mouth as if she could cage the curse within. Her heart thundered in her chest. She wanted only to be loved, to belong, but she saw in their gazes only terror. The fairies encircled her, their wings like blades, their glow turning cold. "What will we do with her?" one asked. "She cannot remain in the world. She cannot roam free." The prince's eyes lingered on her. There was sorrow there, perhaps even lingering affection, but it was buried beneath resolve. "We bury her," he said at last, "alive, so that her curse is smothered in the soil. Let her voice sink into silence forever." A ripple of assent moved through the court. Thumbelina's breath shattered. "Please," she whispered, "please, I can learn to control it. I can." But even her plea carried ruin. A butterfly that had dared to flutter close collapsed mid-air, lifeless at her feet. The fairies seized her then, their hands deceptively soft, yet unyielding as iron. They carried her through the wilting glade, past the blackened fountains and brittle flowers, to a hollow in the earth. The pit gaped like a mouth, waiting to swallow her whole. Thumbelina thrashed weakly, her tiny arms no match for their numbers. "I only wanted to live," she sobbed. "You will," the prince murmured, his expression unreadable. "In silence, in the soil, the world will be spared from your voice." Her body was lowered into the pit. Soil rained down in handfuls, cold and heavy, clinging to her hair, her dress, her trembling fingers. She screamed, but her scream split the roots of the trees, sent the fairies reeling back, their wings singed with decay. "Hurry," one cried. "Bury her before the land dies." More earth was thrown. Thumbelina clawed at the air, but each breath brought only dust. The sky shrank above her, shrinking to a crack of light, then a sliver, then nothing. Darkness swallowed her, and still her voice tried to break free.